What would you do if you made a deal with the devil that demanded the life of the person you loved most in exchange for unimaginable wealth and success? And what if that deal didn't end with your death, but instead cursed your very bloodline, haunting your children, your grandchildren, and your ancestors for 7 generations, trapping them in a nightmare of blood and shadow from which there is no escape, even in the grave? Imagine watching your own mother, the woman who gave you life, transform into a green-skinned monster right before your eyes. Imagine being forced to choose between saving your little sister and beating your own mother to death with a wooden pestle to destroy the demon wearing her face. And then, after you think you've survived, after you've burned the body and cast the evil mirror into the darkest depths of the sea, imagine looking into the eyes of your own sister and seeing nothing but a black, endless void as she tears into a raw, dead crow with her teeth. This is the terrifying story of the Perewon Gan, a story of an Indonesian family who thought they could outsmart the darkness only to realize that the darkness was already inside them, waiting for the perfect moment to consume their souls. This is a story where no one gets a happy ending, and the only thing left at the end is a chilling laugh that echoes through the corridors of hell. Now let's travel back to the beginning, to the moment where this nightmare truly began, in a house that sat steeped in gloom and ancient secrets. The story starts in Indonesia, in a large, ominous house that always seemed to be shrouded in twilight, no matter the time of day. Inside this house, in a room that was strictly off-limits to guests, a woman named Sudarshi was engaged in a ritual so vile, so repulsive that it would make your blood run cold. Sudarshi was a beautiful woman, the owner of a wildly successful restaurant chain, her 14th branch in the city alone. But her success wasn't built on hard work or good recipes. It was built on black magic. On a pact with an entity known as the Perewon Gan, we see her standing in a dimly lit kitchen, a heavy wooden pestle in her hand. Asterisk, thud, thud, thud. Asterisk, the sound was rhythmic, hypnotic, and sickening. She was grinding something inside a wooden box. Beside her, in a crude cage, dozens of black crows were packed tightly, their eyes watching her with an intelligence that was unnervingly human. Around her, the shelves were lined with strange artifacts, dried herbs, strange effigies, and the tools of the dark arts. Sudarshi reached into the cage, her hand steady despite the flapping of wings and the pecking of beaks. She grabbed a crow, its black feathers slick and oily. With a quick, practiced motion, she began to pluck the bird alive, whispering incantations under her breath that sounded like dry leaves skittering across a stone floor. Once the bird was naked and trembling, she tossed it into the wooden box and brought the pestle down. Asterisk, crack, squelch, asterisk, she wasn't just killing the bird. She was pulping it, turning it into a gruesome paste. The next morning, in the bright, bustling sunlight of her restaurant, customers lined up around the block. They were eating a dish that was said to be the most delicious chicken they had ever tasted. They laughed, they ate, they praised Sudarshi's culinary genius. They had no idea they were feasting on crow meat, meat that had been offered up in a ritual of sacrifice. Sudarshi and her husband Miraj watched the happy customers with smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Miraj was proud of his wife's success, the money pouring in, the prestige they had gained. He didn't know the terrible price they were paying or the monster that was growing closer to them with every meal served. But the entity that granted these wishes, the Perewon Gan, was greedy. It didn't just want sacrifices of birds. It wanted human souls. It wanted the person Sudarshi loved most, her husband. One evening, while Sudarshi was cutting dragon fruit in the kitchen, the atmosphere shifted. Miraj was standing nearby, chatting happily about the expansion of their business. Suddenly, Sudarshi froze. Her eyes locked onto a crow that had landed on the windowsill just outside. The bird looked at her, tilting its head, and Sudarshi felt a cold, invisible hand seize control of her body. It wasn't her anymore. Her right arm, holding the sharp knife, began to move on its own. It was slow, deliberate. She watched in horror as her hand turned the knife toward her husband, who was still smiling, oblivious to the danger. She tried to scream, to warn him, but her voice was gone. She tried to stop her arm, but the force was too strong. The knife inched closer to Miraj's back. Just as she was about to strike, Miraj turned around and said, "Thank you, Sudarshi." The sound of his voice, The look in his eyes, it snapped the spell. Sudarshi gasped, dropping the knife. She was cutting dragon fruit again. The crow was gone, but the terror remained. She realized with a sinking dread that she had almost killed the man she loved. She ran to the bathroom, locking the door, and looked into the mirror. Mirage, confused and worried, followed her. He found her standing in front of the bedroom mirror, swaying unsteadily. He reached out to touch her shoulder to ask what was wrong, but the moment his fingers grazed her skin, Sudarshi collapsed. Her body hit the floor with a heavy thud. Mirage screamed for his daughters, Maya and Lani, but by the time they arrived, their mother was gone. Her eyes were open, but they weren't seeing this world. A deep, guttural voice poured from her throat, a voice that didn't belong to a human. It laughed, a dry, rasping sound, and said, "My eyes are closed now. No one can save her." The house descended into chaos. Sudarshi was alive, but she was an empty shell, possessed by the Jinn. 2 years passed. Mirage, unable to cope with the trauma of what he had seen, what he had heard, lost his mind. He was admitted to a mental asylum, leaving his 2 daughters, Maya and Lani, to grow up in that haunted house with their catatonic mother. After 2 long years, Mirage was released. His brother Roni came to pick him up. Maya and Lani, dressed in their best clothes, waited anxiously for their father. When the car pulled up, little Lani couldn't contain herself. She ran and jumped into her father's arms. Maya hugged him, tears streaming down her face. It seemed like a miracle. The family was back together. But that night, the illusion began to crack. Over dinner, Mirage spoke as if no time had passed at all. He asked where Sudarshi was, if she was still at the restaurant. Maya, not wanting to upset him, lied softly, saying their mother was in her room resting. But as the night wore on, strange sounds began to drift through the house, the sound of music, an old, waltzing melody. Maya went to investigate, creeping down the dark hallway toward her parents' bedroom. Inside, the room was dimly lit, and there, in the center of the room, she saw her father. He was dancing. He was swaying back and forth, arms outstretched, holding a partner that wasn't there. He was spinning and dipping, smiling vacantly at the empty air. He whispered to the ghost, "I miss you so much. I'll never leave you." It was heartbreaking. It was terrifying. And then Maya saw it, the mirror. The same mirror that had been in the room 2 years ago when her mother was taken. It stood in the corner, catching the faint light, and for a second, Maya could have sworn she saw a reflection in it that wasn't her father's. Terrified, she backed away and ran to her room. That night, a storm raged outside. Thunder shook the windows, and rain lashed against the glass like handfuls of gravel. Lani was crying, asking her sister if their father was cold in the ground. Maya tried to comfort her, but she was just as scared. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the house. Maya ran to the window. The window was broken, glass scattered across the floor. And there, on the sill, lay a single black crow feather. She looked out into the rain-swept darkness. And there, standing at the edge of the woods, was a figure. It was her father. But he wasn't moving. He was just staring at the house. Maya screamed for him, but he didn't answer. Suddenly, he sprinted toward the house. But he didn't come to the door. He ran to a heavy steel construction rod that was lying in the yard. Without hesitation, without a scream, he slammed his own head onto the sharp, jagged end of the rod. It was brutal. It was instantaneous. Maya watched in absolute horror as her father fell lifeless to the wet ground. The silence that followed was louder than the thunder. The next day was a blur of funerals and grief. Maya stood by the grave, feeling utterly alone. Her uncles and aunts, her father's siblings, gathered around, but they didn't offer comfort. They offered judgment. They looked at the big house, the property, and saw only an inheritance. They whispered among themselves, wondering how a young girl like Maya could manage such an estate. They wanted her to sell it, to move into a small apartment, and to give them the money. Their greed was a palpable sickness, repugnant in the face of such tragedy. But not all of them were greedy. Aunt Ayu, a woman with sharp eyes and a quiet demeanor, tried to keep her brothers in line. She knew the family history. She knew why the brothers were so eager to get their hands on that money. They had already spent their share of the inheritance, and they were drowning in debt. She scolded them, telling them they had no right to the house, and took them to see Sudarshi. In the bedroom, Sudarshi lay exactly where she had fallen 2 years ago. Her eyes were open, unseeing. Ayu leaned down and whispered something in her ear, a secret warning, perhaps, or a prayer. Then she left, but not before casting a long, suspicious glance at the mirror in the corner. She knew what it was. She knew the evil it contained. Maya was now alone, responsible for her sister and her catatonic mother. Money was running out fast. Desperate, she began selling off old furniture from the warehouse. A buyer came, a man looking for antiques. He offered her pennies for her family's history. But then his eyes fell on a particular object. It was a strange, carved wooden box, the same box Sudarshi had used to grind the crows. It looked antique, exotic. The man offered a good price for it, but Maya refused. It was her mother's favorite, she said. She wouldn't sell it. That night, Maya was cleaning her mother's bedridden body. As she gently sponged her back, she froze. A gaping wound had appeared on Sudarshi's back, seemingly out of nowhere. It was raw, red, and to Maya's horror, it was crawling with maggots. Panic surged through her. She called Uncle Roni, the only one who had ever been kind to them. Roni rushed over, but when he reached the door to Sudarshi's room, he stopped dead in his tracks. He saw the mirror inside, and a look of pure terror washed over his face. He refused to enter. "Maya," he said, his voice trembling, "you have to cover that mirror. Or, better yet, get it out of the house. It's cursed. It killed your father. It's killing your mother." Roni told Maya everything. He told her the dark history of their bloodline. He told her about their grandfather, a man who had been desperate for wealth. He had made a deal with the Perewon Gan. The deal was simple: wealth and honor in exchange for the life of his most loved one. But their grandfather had 3 wives. He sacrificed 2 of them to the demon, feeding them to the entity in exchange for gold and power. But he loved the 3rd wife, Maya's grandmother, too much to sacrifice her. To save her, he tried to break the deal. He performed a ritual to banish the Jinn, a ritual that required the ultimate sacrifice, himself. In a flashback, we see the grandfather standing in front of that very mirror. He called out to the Perewon Gan, "Come, take me instead." The entity emerged, a shadow of pure malice, and accepted the bargain. It struck the grandfather down with the very pestle he had used to prepare sacrifices. A young Roni had watched from the shadows, hidden, traumatized for life. The grandfather died, but the mirror remained. And the curse remained. Roni explained that Sudarshi, desperate to keep the restaurant successful, must have made a deal of her own. The Jinn demanded Mirage's life. Sudarshi loved him too much to go through with it, so the Jinn took her instead. And now it was coming for the rest of them. Roni promised to find a way to stop it. He got into his car to fetch a mystic, a Kaburai, who might know how to destroy the entity, but the Jinn was watching. It didn't want the truth to come out. As Roni drove, his phone rang. It was his wife. He answered, but instead of her voice, he heard that sound. That laugh. The laugh of the Perewon Gan. It was a sound that froze his soul. His eyes went blank. He drove onto a train track and stopped. The train's whistle blew, a mournful sound in the night, but Roni didn't move. He just stood there, staring into the void until the train hit him. Maya was now truly alone. That evening, she went to check on her mother. She opened the door to the bedroom, and the room was ice cold. In the reflection of the mirror, she saw it. A green-skinned entity was sitting behind Sudarshi. It was leaning over her, licking the festering wound on her back with a long, slimy tongue. Maya slammed the door shut, screaming. She tried to call Roni, but he didn't answer. She turned around to find Lani walking toward the Forbiddance Room. Maya grabbed her sister, terrified the entity would take her too. Just then, a voice spoke. "Maya? Lani?" It was Sudarshi. She was awake. For the first time in 2 years, she was speaking. Lani broke free from Maya and ran to her mother. Sudarshi embraced her, cooing soft words. Maya stood in the doorway, torn between joy and terror. Was this really her mother? Or was it the Jinn pretending? Sudarshi asked for a dress. "Go to the wardrobe, Maya. Get me a dress." Maya opened the wardrobe and froze. All the clothes inside had turned a vibrant, unnatural green. She pulled out a green dress and turned to help her mother. When she pulled back the blanket to change her, the wound on her back was gone, healed. Sudarshi smiled, a smile that was too wide, too knowing. She asked Maya, "Aren't you happy I'm well, Maya?" Maya didn't know what to say. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, the greedy uncles were plotting. They decided to bury a magical talisman, *tab is asterisk, under the house to weaken the Jinn, hoping they could then swoop in and claim the property. They crept to the house in the dead of night and dug a hole near the window. But as they placed the talisman in the ground, they didn't see the shadow rising up behind them. They didn't see the Jinn watching. Suddenly, the sound of the pestle echoed from inside the house, thud, 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 asterisk. Terrified out of their minds, the uncles dropped their tools and ran. But one uncle, Rajab, the youngest, didn't escape. He returned home that night alone. The lights in his house began to flicker. He heard footsteps running across the ceiling. He grabbed a knife, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt a cold hand grab his ankle from under the sofa. In a panic, he stabbed downward with the knife, again and again, screaming. It wasn't until the lights came back on that he realized what he had done. He had sliced off his own foot. And there, emerging from the shadows, was the Jinn. It picked up the severed foot and began to eat it. Rajib screamed, but no one heard him as he was dragged into the darkness. Back at the main house, Maya was losing her grip on reality. She tried to cover the mirror with a cloth, but it felt like a suffocating weight. She thought she saw insects on Lani's face as her sister tried to feed Sudarshi. In a panic, she slapped the bowl out of Lani's hand, hurting her sister's feelings. She tried to apologize, but the air was thick with dread. That night, Maya dreamed of crows. She woke up to the smell of rotting flesh. She reached under her pillow and pulled out a dead, decomposing crow. She retched, and when she looked in the mirror, her mouth was full of blood and crow feathers. She scrubbed and scrubbed, but the blood wouldn't wash away. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. Her face was clean. Was she going mad? Then came the sound of glass breaking. Maya ran to the window. A crow had flown into the glass, killing itself. But that wasn't the worst part. She saw Lani, barefoot, walking like a sleepwalker out of the house and toward the old well in the yard. Maya sprinted outside, catching Lani just as she was about to jump in. Lani woke up, confused, not knowing why she was outside. They looked back at the house, and there, standing in the window, was Sudarshi. But it wasn't Sudarshi. Her skin was turning green. Her hair was turning into twisted vines. Maya grabbed Lani and they fled. They drove through the night, seeking refuge at Aunt Ayu's house, but the road was treacherous. At a lonely gas station, an old woman approached the car. Maya rolled down the window to give her some money, but the woman smiled, revealing rotting teeth. "I don't want your money," the old woman rasped. "I want your soul," Maya slammed on the gas, terrified. In the rearview mirror, she saw the old woman running after the car, her legs elongating, stretching inhumanly fast. They finally reached Aunt Ayu's house. Breathless and trembling, Ayu took them in. She saw the green tint on Sudarshi's skin. The transformation was accelerating. Ayu explained the full truth. The deal Sudarshi made was simple, wealth in exchange for her husband. Since she refused to kill Miraj, the Jinn took her body. Now, the Perewon Gan was fully in control. To destroy it, they had to break the vessel. Ayu gave Maya a bowl of holy water, blessed by a powerful mystic. "Sprinkle this on her 7 times, Ayu instructed. "It will force the Jinn out. If that doesn't work, if the water fails, you must burn her alive. You must burn the body to save the soul." Maya wept at the thought, but Ayu was stern. "That thing in your house is not your mother anymore. It is a demon that wants to eat your sister." Ayu stayed behind to perform a protection ritual to keep the Jinn at bay while Maya went back to the house. But as Ayu began to chant, she looked up. The Jinn was already there. It was hanging upside down from the ceiling, watching her with glowing red eyes. The ritual failed. Ayu was silenced by the darkness. Maya returned to the house, leaving Lani locked safely in the car. "Don't open the door for anyone," Maya warned, "especially not Mom." The house was dark. The electricity was dead. Maya lit an old oil lamp, the flame casting dancing shadows on the walls. She made her way to the bedroom. Sudarshi was there, her skin now completely green, her eyes glowing red. She looked like a goblin from a nightmare. Maya began the ritual. She splashed the holy water on her mother. Asterisk 1, 2, 3, asterisk nothing happened. Sudarshi just smiled. Outside, a storm began to brew again. In the car, Lanny heard a tapping on the glass. She looked up. It was Uncle Roni. He was smiling, looking unharmed. Lani, unaware of his death, unlocked the door, happy to see her favorite uncle. She took his hand, and he led her toward the old warehouse building on the property. Inside the house, Maya heard the car door slam. She ran to the window and saw Lani walking away with a figure. "Lani!" Maya screamed. She dropped the bowl and ran outside. She followed them to the warehouse. The warehouse was filled with shadows. In the center of the room, she saw them. But it wasn't Uncle Roni holding Lanny's hand. It was the entity wearing her grandfather's face, a rotting, skeletal corpse with glowing eyes. Sudarshi was there too, her body twisted in impossible angles. She looked at Maya and hissed, "Bow down to your master." "Bow down to the king," Maya refused. She knew it was a trick. Sudarshi threatened Lanny, "Bow or I will snap her neck." Terrified, Maya realized she had no choice. She approached the monstrous figure of her grandfather and knelt, touching her forehead to his feet in a sign of submission. The grandfather entity laughed, a sound like grinding bones. The distraction worked. Lanny woke from her trance and screamed, "Run, Lanny, run!" Maya shouted. Maya grabbed the heavy wooden pestle that was lying nearby, the same instrument of death that had started this all. She turned toward Sudarshi. She knew the truth now. The grandfather entity was just a projection. The real Jinn was inside her mother. To kill the demon, she had to destroy the body. With tears streaming down her face, Maya swung the pestle and struck her mother. Sudarshi gasped. Maya struck again. And again. She was sobbing, apologizing with every blow, but she didn't stop. The grandfather entity began to fade, dissolving into mist as the vessel was destroyed. Finally, with one last strike, Sudarshi fell. The green skin faded, leaving behind only the broken body of her mother. Lani ran to Maya, and they held each other, covered in the blood of the one person they had tried to save. But Maya knew it wasn't over. The mirror was still inside. Maya ran back into the house, ignoring the fires that were starting to spread from the overturned lamp. She grabbed the mirror. It was heavy, pulsing with a dark energy. She ran out, past her unconscious mother, and threw the mirror into the back seat of the car. They had to get rid of it. They had to throw it into the sea. They drove to the coast, the sun beginning to rise over a gray, choppy ocean. Maya threw the mirror as far as she could into the waves. It sank instantly, swallowed by the deep. Exhausted, broken, and traumatized, the two sisters returned to the car. They parked it by the roadside and collapsed into the seats, falling into a deep, dreamless sleep. Hours later, Lanny woke up to the sound of a thud against the car window. She looked out and saw a dead crow on the pavement. She turned to look at her sister in the driver's seat. But the seat was empty. Maya was gone. Lanny got out of the car, calling for her sister. The wind was cold, the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks. Lanny walked around to the back of the car. There, sitting on the trunk, facing away from her, was Maya. "Maya!" Lanny whispered. Maya turned around slowly. Lanny gasped and stepped back. Maya's eyes were gone. In their sockets were two black, void-like holes. And in the center, where her pupils should have been, were two glowing red dots. Blood was smeared around her mouth. And in her hands she held a dead, raw crow. She took a bite, tearing the flesh with her teeth, chewing slowly. She looked at her little sister, and a wide, terrifying smile stretched across her face. It was the smile of the Perewon Gan. The story didn't end with the death of the mother. It didn't end with the destruction of the mirror. The curse demanded a soul. When Maya had killed her mother with the pestle, she had unknowingly completed the ritual. She had offered the sacrifice. And now she was the new host. As Lanny screamed in the sea breeze, Maya laughed, a sound that was no longer human. The deal had been kept. The Perewon Gan had found a new home. And for 7 generations, the nightmare would continue, waiting in the shadows for the next foolish soul to make a deal with the devil